Christmas Eve always had a certain magic to it, the kind that made even the coldest winter feel warm. That night, the house was glowing, golden lights spilling from the fireplace, wrapping paper rustling like soft music, and the smell of cinnamon. Drifting from the kitchen, outside, the snow fell in lazy spirals, catching the streetlight like tiny diamonds. I'd been looking forward to this night for weeks. No late work calls. No errands to run, just family, food, and the quiet kind of joy that doesn't ask for much, I thought. Maybe this would be the night that reminded us of how we used to be. She was in the kitchen, moving between the counter and the oven. Her hair was tied back, a few loose strands catching the light. She smiled when I walked in, or maybe it was just a twitch at the corner of her mouth. Hard to tell now, looking back. There was something restrained about her, like she was there, but not here. I brushed it off. We'd had a rough couple of months, sure, but I wasn't going to let that shadow tonight, not on Christmas Eve, so I wrapped my arm around her waist and kissed her cheek. Her skin was warm, but her body didn't lean into mine like it used to. I told myself it was stress. Family gatherings can be like that, a little tense until the drinks are poured and the laughter starts flowing. The living room was a picture-perfect postcard, twinkling. Lights reflected in the window, the soft crackle of the fire, presents stacked neatly under the tree. Each one wrapped in her meticulous style, no tape showing, ribbons curled just so. I smiled at how beautiful it all looked. How beautiful she had made it. We were about to have dinner. Her family would be arriving soon. I imagined the usual scene. Her mother making jokes about my appetite. Her brother challenging me to another round of some game I never win. I pictured laughter, clinking glasses. Maybe even one of those quiet moments where she'd slip her hand into mine under the table. That's what I thought tonight would be. Simple, warm, whole. But sometimes the glow you see in a room isn't from the lights. It's from the match that's about to set everything on fire. Dinner was halfway over when it happened. The table was full, plates stacked with roast, mashed potatoes, and the kind of holiday dishes you only make once a year. Her father was telling some story about Christmas in his childhood, and people were laughing between bites. I was halfway through a sip of wine when she stood up. No warning, no preamble, just stood. She cleared her throat, her eyes scanning the table, and then she looked at me. I thought she was about to give a toast, maybe something sentimental. Instead, she reached into her sweater pocket and pulled out an envelope. Plain, white heavy. She placed it in front of me. "Open it," she said, her voice steady but not cold. I remember my fork still in my hand, my brain lagging a few seconds behind. I looked around the table. No one else seemed surprised. In fact, a couple of them smirked. Something in my chest tightened. I set down my fork, picked up the envelope. The paper was warm from her hand. I slid my finger under the flap. The sound of tearing paper, suddenly louder than the clinking silverware. And there it was. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words swam for a moment. Like I couldn't focus. The air felt heavier. I heard nothing, just a high-pitched ringing in my ears. For a second, there was silence. I could feel every eye on me. My pulse was in my throat. Then, clapping started, slow at first, then louder. Her mother was smiling, tears in her eyes. Her brother slapped the table like it was the punchline to a joke. Someone said, "Good for you." I sat there, holding the papers, my mouth dry, and the only thing running through my head was, they knew. All of them knew. It wasn't just her decision. It was a performance, and I was the unwilling audience. I wanted to say something, anything, but my tongue felt heavy and I just stared at her. She didn't flinch, didn't look guilty, didn't look sad. She looked relieved. It's strange how humiliation doesn't hit like you think it will. You'd expect it to be loud. It's hot, burning in your cheeks. But for me it was cold. Ice dash water dash down dash the dash spine cold. The sound of their applause didn't feel real, it was muffled. Like I was underwater. Her brother got up and hugged her. lifting her slightly off the ground like she'd just won a marathon. Her mother wiped a tear and whispered something in her ear, both of them smiling through it. I stayed in my seat, papers still in my hand. My plate was in front of me, the steam for my food now gone, and I stared at the mashed potatoes like maybe if I focused hard enough, this whole scene would dissolve. How long had they been planning this? Weeks? Months? Did they have group chats about it? Did they toast to it over wine while I was at work? Was I just the villain in their version of the story? Was the cold, inattentive husband who deserved to be blindsided? She was still smiling, not cruelly, not mockingly, but like someone who'd finally exhaled after holding their breath for years. And that somehow cut deeper. It meant this wasn't a spur-of-a-moment decision. It meant every holiday leading up to this, every dinner, every casual love. You had been part of the prelude to tonight. Her father poured champagne, the pop of the cork echoing in my head. They were celebrating. They were toasting her freedom. While I was still trying to understand why I'd just lost my life as I knew it in that moment. I didn't yell, didn't slam my hands on the table, didn't demand an explanation. I just froze. Because when the knives are in your back, you don't feel them going in. You just feel the weight of them when you try to stand up. While the laughter carried on around me, my mind left the room. It went somewhere warmer, somewhere before all of this. I saw her in white again the day we got married. Her smile was so wide, it looked like it hurt. But in the best way. I remember the weight of the ring in my pocket before the ceremony. The way my hand shook when I slid it onto her finger. Back then, I thought shaking meant nerves. Now I wonder if it was just knowing deep down how much I stood to lose. I saw us in our first apartment, cramped. Barely enough space to turn around without bumping into each other. We'd eat dinner on the floor. Because we didn't own a dining table yet, she used to lean her head on my shoulder while we watched movies, the legs tangled up under a blanket that was too small for two. Saw the night we tried cooking that impossible recipe she found online, smoke alarm blaring, us laughing until our stomachs hurt. We ordered takeout and swore we'd never attempt gourmet again. We were broke, tired, and so completely happy. Those moments, they weren't just pictures in my head, they were proof. Proof that at one point it had been real. And yet, sitting here now, holding divorce papers while her family celebrated. All of it felt rewritten, like those memories had been edited. And I was the only one still watching the original cut. Maybe she'd been playing a part, even back then. Or maybe the love was real. And somewhere along the way, it just rotted. I wish I could tell you which one hurts more, finding out it was never real. Or realizing it used to be, and she still walked away. The champagne glasses clinked again, pulling me back into the present. Warmth of those memories vanished, replaced by the cold, metallic taste of betrayal. I don't remember making the decision to leave. One moment I was sitting there, my hands still on the divorce papers. The next, I was standing. No words, no speech, no final glance at the table, just quiet push of the chair against the floor. The sound barely registering over their laughter. I slid my coat from the back of the chair, the fabric brushing against my arm like it was reminding me to feel something. But my heart wasn't racing with anger. It was pounding in that hollow, distant way, like it was happening in someone else's chest. Nobody stopped me. Nobody asked where I was going, and she didn't even look my way. That might have been the deepest cut out of the night. Not the papers, not the applause, but the fact that the woman I once thought I'd grow old with didn't care enough to watch me walk away. I moved through the hallway. Toward the front door, the sound of celebration dimming with every step. The smell of roast beef and cinnamon faded, replaced by the sharp chill of winter air. Seeping through the doorway, my fingers curled around the cold steel of the handle. For a moment, I stood there, wondering if this was my line in the sand, the point where I should turn, say something, make them all see me one last time, but no words came. I opened the door. The cold hit me instantly, wrapping itself around my face and stealing the breath from my lungs. Snow fell in slow, deliberate flakes, each one catching the orange glow of the streetlight. I stepped outside, pulling the coat tighter, my breath turning to mist in the still air. Behind me, the door clicked shut. It sounded final, like the end of a chapter I hadn't agreed to close. The car felt colder than outside. Maybe it was the leather seats. Maybe it was just me. Either way, when I shut the door, silence wrapped around me like a heavy coat I couldn't take off. I turned the key, and the radio came. To life, soft Christmas carols filling the cabin. Normally, I liked this time of year, but tonight, the cheerful voices sounded like they were mocking me. Every peace on earth and joy to the world felt like a personal joke. The wipers brushed the snow from the windshield in slow, rhythmic sweeps, streetlights smeared into yellow streaks. Through the glass, the world outside blurring like I was driving through someone else's dream. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, knuckles whitening, not because I was angry, not yet. It was something worse, the helplessness of replaying the night in my head, imagining all the things I could have said, but didn't. You could have stood up and told them the truth. You could have demanded an answer. You could have refused to let them treat you like an afterthought. Instead, I just walked away. The roads were mostly empty. A few cars passed in the opposite lane, headlights flashing briefly over my face before vanishing into the dark. I wondered where those drivers were headed, probably toward homes full of warmth, laughter, and people who actually wanted them there. Every red light felt longer than it should have. The glow painted the snow crimson, and I sat there watching my breath fog up the inside of the windshield. At one point, I thought about turning around, marching back into that house, not to beg, not to fight, but to exist, to make them see that. I wasn't some disposable extra in their holiday drama, but I didn't. I kept driving, because sometimes the longest way home is the only way to make sure you never go back. By the time I got home, the anger still hadn't come, just a quiet pressure. Like the air before a storm, I tossed my coat over the chair and stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the dark windows. For a while, I didn't move, didn't turn on the lights, didn't even take off my shoes. Then slowly, I walked to my desk. I wasn't going to call her, wasn't going to text. No half-drunk late-night messages begging for answers or throwing insults. She'd made her play in front of an audience. I'd make mine in silence. I pulled open the bottom drawer, the one that stuck a little if you didn't tug it just right. Inside were the things I'd been keeping, not because I thought I'd ever use them, but because some part of me always knew I might need to dot bank statements, screenshots of messages she swore never existed, photos that told a very different story from the one her family believed. I spread them across the desk like puzzle pieces, arranging them until the picture was clear. Not a perfect marriage gone stale. Not a man who didn't try. No. This was betrayal that started long before Christmas Eve. The clock ticked past midnight. It sounded louder than the quiet hum of the heater my pen scratched against paper as I wrote a short note. Not cruel, not desperate, just the truth, simple, plain. M. Pola. Every time I signed my name, I pressed the pen a little harder, not out of rage, but resolve. When I was done, I slid everything into a large envelope. It felt heavier than it should have, like it carried more. Then paper like it carried the years of swallowing my pride, the years of trusting someone who was already halfway out the door. I sealed it shut, and in that moment I realized this wasn't revenge, it was closure, the kind that doesn't wait for permission. The morning light came early, spilling pale and cold across the living room floor. I hadn't really slept, my body had rested. Sure, but my mind had been pacing all night. By the time the sun had fully climbed above the rooftops, I was already dressed. The envelope sat on the table by the door, looking harmless, like it didn't contain the kind of truth that could rearrange someone's entire world. I picked it up, slid it into my coat pocket, and stepped outside. The air was sharp, biting against my cheeks, but it woke me up in a way coffee never could. Each crunch of snow under my boots was deliberate, almost rhythmic. When I reached their house, I could see the glow of lights through the curtains. It was still Christmas for them. I could hear faint music, probably the same holiday playlist we'd used for years. Laughter drifted from inside. Light and easy. I knocked. It wasn't loud, but it was enough. Her brother answered the door, still in pajama pants and a sweatshirt. He looked surprised for half a second before stepping aside. Inside, the warmth hit me instantly, not just from the heat, but from the smell of fresh coffee and leftover pastries. Her family was scattered around the living room, talking, eating, unwrapping the last of the gifts. She was on the couch, legs crossed, a mug in her hand. When she saw me, she didn't speak, didn't smile, didn't frown, just watched. I walked straight to the coffee table, the center of the room, pulled the envelope from my coat, placed it down. The sound of it meeting the wood was soft. But in my head, it was the loudest thing in the room. No speech, no accusations, no grand performance. I just turned and headed for the door. A few of them glanced at each other, confused. Her mother tilted her head, eyes narrowing slightly. My hand found the doorknob. I opened it slowly, letting the cold air seep in, stepped back into the snow. Behind me, the door closed with the gentlest click, but in my mind it sounded like a warning shot. It didn't take long. By the time I got home, the envelope was probably already open. I set my keys on the counter, hung my coat, and sat by the window with a mug of coffee. The steam curled up in front of my face, disappearing into the pale morning light. For a while it was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels intentional, like the world is holding its breath. Then my phone lit up. One call, then another, then a third. Different. Some familiar, some not. I didn't answer. The voicemail notifications came next, piling up like snow on the sidewalk. I didn't listen to those either. Instead, I just sat there, watching the snow drift sideways outside my window, the wind pressing against the glass in slow, deliberate gusts somewhere in that house. Voices were raised. I imagined her brother's confusion, turning into anger, her mother's face shifting from smug approval to shock, her father pacing, demanding explanations. They were finally getting the truth, not the polished, victimized version she'd probably fed them for months. Not the story where I was the cold, inattentive husband, no. Now they had the receipts. The messages she swore didn't exist, the bank withdrawals she couldn't explain, the nights away that weren't just with friends, and the best part, I didn't have to say a word. The phone kept buzzing on the table. I let it vibrate against the wood until it stopped. In that moment, I realized something. Vindication isn't loud. It's quiet. It's sitting in your own living room, drinking coffee, while the people who tore you apart start tearing themselves apart instead. It wasn't joy I felt. Not really. It was something sharper, colder. A kind of peace that comes when you finally set down the weight you've been carrying, even if it lands on someone else. The next morning didn't feel like Christmas. No stockings, no gifts under a tree, no sound of her moving around in the kitchen, singing quietly to herself. And yet, it felt lighter than any holiday I could remember. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the stillness. No voices, no background music, just the faint hum of the heater and the occasional creak of the house settling. I made coffee the way I like it, strong, no sugar, a little too hot, carried it to the window and stood there barefoot, the cold seeping up from the floor. Outside, the snow was falling again. Not in a storm, not in a rush, just quiet. Steady flakes drifting down, like the sky had nowhere else to be. The street was empty. It's untouched. Every surface softened by white. I took a sip, steam curling against my face. The bitterness of the coffee was grounding, solid. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was bracing for something. There was no next fight waiting. No silent dinner, No forced smile in front of her family, just me, and that was enough. I thought about the envelope, not the one she gave me, but the one I left behind. The difference was, hers was meant to end me, mine was meant to free me, and it had. I didn't know what the new year would bring, didn't know if the road ahead would be easier or harder, but I knew this: I'd never again spend my life in a room where my absence meant nothing. The snow kept falling, the coffee kept steaming, and somewhere deep in my chest, something that had been clenched for far too long finally let go.